that essentially $6.3 trillion from last year, and which would still have you trillions up from where it was in 2019. So the idea that this is some sort of austere measure, that this is any sort of meaningful cut, is of course nonsensical. And then beyond that, what they want is a 1% increase every year for the next 10 years after that. So then we're back to increases forever from a base of about $6.3 trillion, which puts you just way above trend of where you were for the last 20 years before the COVID pandemic. So that, just as perspective, that's what we're talking about. We are talking about a microscopic cut from a projected $6.4 trillion down to 6.3-ish. And then that's it. And then it's back to increases every year. And big increases, of course, because 1% of $6.4 trillion is a lot. So that's what we're being told in Washington right now. And apparently we're supposed to be really deeply concerned about all the people who bring suffer if they enforce these sorts of cuts. And I know, though you worked on, of course, on finance legislation when you were working in Congress. I mean, how does this process work, really? So, I mean, why are they always talking about these 10-year deals? I mean, does that even mean anything? Is this essentially really just a deal for the next year? And we keep hearing about how McCarthy is negotiating. And what does this really mean in terms of legislation? Is this just like pure theater, or is this binding on anything in the future?
Right, it's mostly theater, though there is a dynamic where everything's kind of left. And right now you're seeing one of the waves of this theater play out, just kind of the hostage negotiation sort of dynamic, right, where all of the reliable financial news outlets are the ones that are really pushing doom and gloom narrative, right? Crisis is coming, the doomsday clock. I saw the Bloomberg headline about all this. And so what we have right now is a political situation that in general, beyond the obvious disinterest, any sort of physical restraint, it's something that can only sort of accomplish anything, and almost always for the worst, with the perspective of crisis. Democrats have used this in the past with getting the moderate members of the Senate, Sinema and Manchin, hyping global warming hysterics or some sort of stuff. They were able to use inflation concerns with their Orwellian name, Inflation Reduction Act, trying to have a bunch of nonsense within that. But it's a situation where the only time you can get anything of significance done is from the prospect of crises. And so McCarthy's hand in this has been interesting because some of this is back to the speaker battle, where some of the more sober members of the Republican caucus, people like Chip Roy in particular, who was on the outside, someone who had been converted, he's someone who had a larger say in the Republican strategy for the House on this. And so at this point, you have those members that see this reduction in projected spending as a victory, even though I think someone like Chip Roy, who I think takes this stuff a lot more seriously than the majority of Congress, recognizes this solution. I'm not trying to give Chip Roy too much credit, but I think that he recognizes what it is. They're trying to get a small victory now. The only time that we've seen really a major victory is overstating it, but a lot of the success relative, your article mentions that we saw a slowdown in spending in the Obama years. That was where the debt ceiling negotiations played into sequestration, which was the process where kind of both sides agreed to reductions in projected spending, not cuts, reductions in projected spending on priorities that both sides seemed to favor. So it was reduction in military spending, which led to Trump talking about how underprepared our military is, so you had that whole dynamic where people were saying our military is shot because we're not giving Boeing nearly as much money as we could be. On the other side, there were some entitlement spending changes. The Democrats didn't like the idea was that they were going to create a package with some time elements to it that would be so distasteful to both sides that they would be able to kick the can down the road a little bit. They negotiated. That never really happened. It wasn't until Trump took office and Republicans completely gave up the farm on spending issues because Trump wanted it that way that you saw those sequestration restraints broken away entirely. I don't think we're going to get something quite like that this time around. I think you have fewer members that were elected on the cause of spending, and you have the Tea Party wave, so there was that dynamic where the rhetoric, there were members of Congress that was trying to get something that they could sell back home from this really energized Tea Party wing. To take credit for what the Biden administration did not really calculate was the idea that Kevin McCarthy would actually be able to get enough votes. And so this was a deal that is compromised. Again, it was very modest in the scheme of the larger dynamic because it was something that Republicans could get through the moderates within the Republican caucus while also placating the Chip Roys. It still had some opposition. You had some of your usual McCarthy critics like Matt Gaetz that said this would go far enough, and they're not wrong about this, but the nature of this bill was trying to put the burden during this larger legislation by crisis moment onto the Democrats in the Senate and the Biden administration. That's exactly, I think it's actually playing out with the public opinion. There was a CNN poll. I'm not going to speak to the validity of the CNN poll, but you think if there's pre-existing bias on the vote, it's not going to be Republicans on the right side of this. But there was a CNN poll that showed that 60% of Americans thought that the proper way to deal with this was a debt ceiling increase with spending cuts. Again, that goes with the larger propaganda campaign, but there is broader public support right now on the Republican side for a deal that works in their favor, and that has put the Biden administration from a pure sort of political calculation standpoint in mind. I don't think that they fully expected going in, but I think they kind of saw Kevin McCarthy much the same way that we did, but it was going to be a buffoonish, weak leader. And again, I'm certainly not going to be someone out there overly praising Kevin McCarthy, but he was able to, with this specific issue, achieve something with his caucus, getting it through the House that I'd expect McCarthy had it. It's not a long-term solution, but that was a level of competency which I did not expect. It's not his bio, and so I think that caught Biden very flat-footed.
Yeah, and so we're talking about something fairly mild here, but of course, I mean, I wouldn't oppose it if they managed to slow down. Rather than give Biden everything he wants, I mean, a mild slowdown would be great, and that's really generally the most you can hope for in Washington is just a slowdown. And Rothbard's written on this too, that when you're talking about a mere slowdown in spending and projected spending, you're only increasing the budget 1% instead of 2%. This is denounced usually in Washington as some sort of cut, because the idea is that Washington is entitled to a certain amount of money, and if you don't let them increase the amount that they spend every year, then you're cutting their money, when in reality you're just not giving them as much as they want, even though spending is actually increasing. So it's always important to keep in mind what that is. So we're looking at, of course, no real cuts, certainly beyond the extreme short term, something from 2022 to 2023. But it does look like it would be a bit of a slowdown, which goodness knows is badly needed after these massive inflationary increases in the budget during 2020, 2021, and 2022. I mean, really, the budget needs to be flat for 10 years to bring things back into a reasonable alignment between the taxpayers' production levels and what the government is skimming off the top. That's what needs to be necessary just to get back to something that seemed normal back in 2010. no increases are warranted at this time for years because they got such huge increases for the past 3 years. But of course, we're at this higher level now, and they're just going to demand more growth constantly. And so that's just one of the big myths that's being thrown around, is that the anti-Biden side on this wants some sort of big clawbacks on spending, but that's clearly not what's going on. And so you might get a welcome slowdown, but that's it. And so you can expect, of course, we still to this day hear about the evils of sequestration back in 2013. It's like you said, right? For years, the military's still whining about the supposed cuts they got and how they haven't been able to get ready enough. And so there's one aspect of it. The other is that, of course, welfare spending, it was never allowed to increase as much as it should have. And on top of that, of course, the real problem is tax cuts. That drove up the deficit. It's never runaway spending that drives up the deficit. It's always the tax cuts in Washington, I think. So that's just, it's going to be the usual same stuff. You can just expect that if they get even some minor cuts this time around, we're going to be hearing about it for years from the Pentagon and from people who want more welfare spending, about how greatly Washington is suffering, how we've reduced everything to the bone, and how we've approached anarchy levels with the federal budget because it hasn't been increasing the way it needs to be. And so anytime you're just being told about how there's significant cuts being put forward in Washington, you can just be sure that you're being lied to and that there's some serious gaslighting going on.
How would we refill all the Stinger missiles that we sent to Ukraine if we embrace a slowdown in future military spending? That's a problem. Who can solve that problem?
Well, the assumption, of course, right, is that Washington's entitled to limitless spending all the time, so they could just send a few $100 billion to Ukraine, and you taxpayer owe it to Washington to backfill all of that, even if you had no interest in the Ukraine thing whatsoever. So yeah, they could stop spending, right? Talk about, is there any discretion? Is there any spending more discretionary than the hundreds of billions of dollars shipped to Ukraine? Possibly not. And yet it's just being shipped out to foreign countries while crime surges in the U.S. and bridges collapse literally. So that's the game they're playing in Washington. I think one of the second things that we need to be aware of about how you're being lied to in this is this thing about how the U.S. has never defaulted. And I don't think we've ever covered this in detail here on Radio Rothbard. You're going to hear this pretty often, is Biden goes on TV, Yellen goes on some Sunday morning show and talks about how the U.S. has never defaulted. And there's a couple aspects to this. One, there's a dumb moralistic aspect to it, like America's not a deadbeat nation. It pays its bills, which, of course, is absurd, trying to shame middle-class taxpayers and feeling like they're deadbeats if they don't support more federal spending. Of course, Biden's friends declare bankruptcy left and right. People who are at the billionaire level are corporate masters. They have no qualms about declaring bankruptcy and not paying back their bills all the time. But you, Mr. Middle-class taxpayer, you better pay back your bills or you're some kind of a deadbeat. There's this weird double standard on bankruptcy in America. But, of course, the U.S. already is a deadbeat. It's already inflating away its debts. And so, boy, if you could do that, right? Just pay back your debts in counterfeit money or devalue dollars. Fantastic. And that's what the federal government is doing when it's just inflating the money supply. Oh, we don't have enough money to pay back the money we owe, so we'll engage in more deficit spending, which takes advantage of QE, money printing, monetization of debt. We'll use all that to pay back our debt. So there's already a partial default going on there. But there's also just outright explicit defaults that have taken place in the past. And this was great recently when Biden tweeted this on Twitter and said, oh, the U.S., he reiterated the U.S. has never ever defaulted. And then in one of the community notes, they said, actually, the U.S. has defaulted. They linked to a great Mises article by John Chamberlain saying, well, yeah, the U.S. defaulted before. It defaulted in the years after the revolution when there was a delay on the loans it paid, and the federal government negotiated basically a haircut on all of the loans it owed at unfavorable terms for the people it still owed money to. So that was a default right there. There was the greenback default of 1862 when they created $60 million, which was a lot back then, in demand notes supposedly redeemable in gold. That was never fulfilled. The U.S. Treasury just defaulted on that. Probably the most notorious was the 1934 Liberty Bond default, where the U.S. was contractually obligated to pay off its bonds in gold, and then just after FDR came in, took the U.S. off the gold standard, said, oh, sorry, we're just paying you back in devalued dollars. Now, so that wasn't anywhere near paying back the real value of those bonds. It was just a straight up default. And then there was the so-called short default in 1979, where the U.S. just basically failed to make its payments on $122 million in Treasury bills due to some screw-ups going on in the Treasury Department. Short-term interest rates spiked. The U.S. was sued by bondholders for breach of contract, and yet another default right there. So there's been at least 4 times the U.S. has defaulted, not counting the fact that it's constantly inflating away the value of the dollars in order to pay back its current debt in defaulted dollars. So it's it's quite astounding that they even get up there and claim that. But they have no qualms about it. I mean, Yellen just goes up and says this is the way it is. There's never been a default. And so I guess people are falling for it. But the fact that this has happened before illustrates that they're really just trying to sow panic where there's not nearly as much cause for it as they would claim.
Thankfully, I think that the element of growing institutional skepticism is seeing this more as an acceptable outcome going forward. I think particularly on the right, there's a lot less of the sort of institutional, the sort of concern about, oh, well, obviously this is something we necessarily have to do. I mean, I think it's still a minority opinion, and particularly not one held by the largest people in Congress by any means. But I think that you are seeing growing questions about exactly what obligation do we really have here in the long run. Of course, when it comes to this particular dynamic, it was certainly great to see the Biden administration fact check more or less in real time for community notes. There is no the threat default here is both there's no fear and there's also inevitability. Right? Because in the short term, while they are playing the peak hysterics for financial news headlines and trying to use as political leverage, Secretary Yellen is well understood in Congress that they will prioritize bond payments. No matter what happens, there is no concern there of people that is going to be handled through existing operations by prioritization of what they're going to pay on. So in the short term, the idea that we're going to start defaulting en masse on Treasury bonds is complete make-believe media narrative for political leverage. The other side of it, though, of course, default is inevitable with the federal government. There is no way that we are ever going to pay back the $30+ trillion in the debt that everyone talks about, even less likelihood of ever fulfilling the unfunded liabilities and obligations that are on the books. And inevitably, one way or another, whether it is inflation, whether it is explicit default, whether it is a mixture of the two, probably most likely, default is inevitable given just the way that this government functions or doesn't function. continue to steal and pillage from the American people and those foolish enough to invest with it, and it will enrich its class of patrons that benefit from it and promote their agenda. And inevitably, there's going to be a lot of people that are screwed over, either because they are making preparations now in their declining ages for benefits they're not going to receive, whether it is the continual erosion of the value of the money they're saving. It is both an impossibility in the short term and an inevitability in the long run. And if that is something that it shows the extent to which the financial media, mainstream corporate press, this larger propaganda dynamic way that economic issues are discussed in a country as unserious as ours, it completely distorts the reality, say nothing about having an understanding of history, again, all for the purpose of this form of governing by crisis, or ratchet the fears every second can, so the powers that be can try to get away with as much as the process will allow.
Yeah, the grift often works pretty well because these people do have, and maybe, and hopefully you're right, is that the polish of the experts is fading a bit, because that's certainly what happened in 2008, 2009, was we need limitless spending to bail out these finance people, these banks, $1 trillion in easy loans for the banks to keep them in business, even though they can't run a bank properly, and all of those bailouts that ensued, as well as QE, which of course was printing billions in order to buy mortgage-backed securities and government debt in order to keep the interest rate low. We were told you had to do all that or else there will be a recession and high unemployment. And then when we did get high unemployment anyway, and it took years for that job market to recover, it was really 2014 or so by the time you got back to a normal expansion sort of economy. We were told, oh, it would have just been much worse if you hadn't given us all that free money, if you hadn't let us do whatever we wanted. Well, what evidence? How much worse? How can you prove that? Well, they can't. All they do is claim it would have just been worse if you didn't let us do whatever we want. And that's, of course, what they're going to do now. There's already a recession in the works. I mean, it's clear that, like Deutsche Bank is saying, yeah, there's basically a 100% chance of recession at this point. When you look at countless indicators, you look at the Empire State Manufacturing Index, which is just massively in decline, well into recessionary territory. You look at how much banks are clawing back their loans, already deep in recessionary territory. That's almost a foolproof indicator of recession. But we can just point out 10 different indicators here. Home prices, I mean, we can just keep going. What they're going to say then is that, oh, well, the economy's weakening, but the reason it's weakening is you didn't let us spend enough money. It was these negotiations that slowed things down. And it is going to be somewhat sellable as a fake narrative, because as you say, right, the Treasury is going to prioritize paying off the creditors, wealthy investors and their friends within the regime. They're going to get paid off first, no matter what. And so what that means then is the Treasury is going to prioritize that over other types of spending in the economy. And so that will bring a short-term, in fact, decline in GDP, because GDP is dependent on the way they calculate it, involves government spending. And then suddenly people would save, it would shift then to a higher interest rate, a more savings-based economy, and then that sort of thing, people planning for the future, people investing for the future, doesn't show up in GDP. So then it's going to show as this big decline in the economy, and they're going to say, oh, look, you nuked the economy by not giving us enough money to spend. I mean, and that's why here at the Mises Institute, right, we're just going to have to keep explaining it over and over again, is that, well, if you're trying to blame the economic decline, which is due to the Fed's inflationary monetary inflation, they're going to try and claim, though, that no, it was because there wasn't enough government spending. You didn't let us do what we wanted. And that's what they're going to try and do. And they're going to say, boy, if you hadn't let us spend even a little bit, you let us spend, everything would have been way, way worse. So that no matter what, they're going to claim that things would have been better if you let the government spend more money. That's the narrative they always have, and that's what they always say. And it is unmanageable at this point, because in reality, even if you let them keep spending the way they want, it's going to eventually just take over more and more of the budget. And in my article, I look at some of the analysis here, and you see that the net interest on the debt is going to surpass defense spending by 2028. And at that point, we're talking about $1 trillion. And then Medicare spending will surpass in 2044. I mean, by mid-century, or so in 20 years from now, we're talking about, if you run the numbers based on the Congressional Budget Office's estimates, by 2028, the third largest quote-unquote program in the federal government is just going to be paying interest on the debt. The only things that will get more spending than interest on the debt is Social Security and Medicare back in 2028. So it's going to be more than defense, it's going to be more than all general poverty reduction stuff. If you divide out Medicaid, it's going to be more than Medicaid, which of course includes Obamacare and all those massive amounts of new spending. And so a huge portion of your budget, by the time you get to mid-century, you're looking at 40% of all federal revenues being spent on interest, and the rest of that remaining 60% is then going to be divided up into all of that Social Security, poverty relief, infrastructure, defense, everything, because that's all that's going to be left. So it's clearly unmanageable. So they're going to have to come back and at some point say, okay, well, we can only pay this back 90 cents on the dollar, 80 cents on the dollar. That would be the honest thing to do. What they're going to try and do is just inflate it all away, but what that's going to then do is drive more inflation. And so this attempt then to hide the real devaluation, the real default that's going on, is to do it in terms of inflating the currency. And what that does is that transfers the real burden from the investor class, which Yellen is going to make sure gets paid off, and then they are able to cover up for that by inflating the money supply, which then puts the burden on regular people who now have unaffordable homes. Like first-time home buyers can just forget about it. Sets up grocery prices. Your real wages are going down. So you can see what the game is. It's to default by this one way, that is the inflationary default, and not do any explicit honest default, because that would actually cause the prices of bonds to go down and would cost money as far as the investment class is concerned. So that's what they want to do. They want to protect the friends, and they want you as regular people to pay for it. And that's why they're going to try and keep that going as long as they can. But at some point, with the mixture of inflation, and as people begin to see that more and more of the federal budget is going to just pay interest on the debt year after year, as their benefits are being cut, popular political programs are being cut to pay off the spending from past wars, from past benefits for now long dead people, is going to start to become a real serious political problem. It's hard to see how there's not going to be even an explicit default at some point.
And this is where, and it's not simply a problem that American policymakers have, it's an international problem, that the seeds that were sowed over the pre-COVID period of keeping interest rates down so long, with governments refusing to take advantage of that period to get their fiscal house in order, to make some of the grown-up decisions that there's no political will to make, right? We just think remember the way the Tea Party was portrayed in Grand Office with relatively minor and modest changes to intelligence programs. You think about the way that austerity was branded as a devil term in Europe, with the same sort of seriousness behind it. The refusal to do that is not remedied the situation. And the thing is, that's also the other side of it, and this is where there is this, I think, hope within the political class of the Fed to pivot. This is going back to, as my light falls down, another crisis to deal with. Dealing with this legislation by crisis, their goal has been to use the banking fallout, which is still not over, to try to force and beg the Fed to pivot on interest rate hikes, which contribute to this problem. I think the political pressure that you're going to see Powell under is only going to go up from there. Elizabeth Warren's going to use this to get on as many TV shows as perfectly as humanly possible to try to portray this narrative that all of our issues come from an extremist, overly dovish Fed that's trying to play catch up with the inflation issues. They're still playing American. We even had Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari, who is hardly known as sort of an arrogant, dovish sort of figure out there. I mean, he is saying that interest rates will probably have to go higher still and for longer, given the way that inflation is cooperating. So that whole pressure, this entire dynamic, is something that is making the irresponsibility of the congressional side of things, the spending side of things, the buffoonish Janet Yellen sort of approach to all this, even more difficult to deal with. And I think all of this is going to fuel into, again, this coupled into this dynamic we talked about all the time, mentioned earlier, this systemic, widespread distrust of the expert class. The downside of this, of course, this is exactly the sort of environment that can have very scary outcomes. Because it's very easy to see very dangerous ideas arise from a period of crisis like that, given the mental state of people like young Americans right now, not exactly people that want to be trusting making responsible decisions on economic issues. But like that is, we have created, they have created this very incredibly dangerous environment because of